What's up guys, Will Gibbons here, and I am super excited to finally share with you my new 3D modeling and rendering PC. Now before we get into unboxing and setting this thing up, I do want to thank Puget Systems for helping to make the last few videos possible. So if you've been following along, then you'll know the last couple videos I made were answering the most common question I get, which is what type of 3D modeling and rendering PC do you recommend? Now, full disclosure, I want to mention Puget Systems did send this to me free of charge, as long as I would share with you my honest and personal opinion as to whether or not I like the machine, my experiences ordering from them, and whether or not I'd recommend it for you guys. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to take a look at is the back side of the PC, the less exciting part. This is the rear of the motherboard. We've got our cables, and then we've got our storage devices up near the front here. First of all, I love the blackout effect. If it's not apparent, I'm a big fan of black. Most of the things in my office are black. Most of what I wear is black. And so I really appreciate the blacked out, low profile, no nonsense, all business kind of stealth mode PC. The next thing I want to comment on are these side panels that I removed from the computer. Not only are they very heavy duty, they have, I'm not sure if you can see this here, they have this kind of dampening cloth here that's almost like a mouse pad like material. I imagine that's going to have a huge impact on the noise. And the fact that I record a lot of tutorials right next to my computer and take calls and stuff, anything that I can get in the way of noise dampening, super stoked on. So as you can probably see here, there's tons of room for storage that I'm not even using yet, but it's good to know that there's room for it, seeing as I'm getting into doing a lot more video, and my CG projects tend to take up more and more space these days. At the bottom here, we have one little SSD. This is what the operating system will run on, and that's going to keep things running nice and smooth. And then we've got the archive drive here where I archive all my projects and store all my media and stuff that I don't need access to all too often. And last but not least, we have a project scratch disk that's mounted on the other side of this motherboard. And that's where most of my project files, when I'm working on them, are going to be stored. That way I have maximum read and write speed for those projects. Okay, so now you're looking at the front side of the PC, or at least the business side, where we get to see all the cool components. We've got our GPU, our CPU, our fans, our radiator, and all that good stuff. This piece of acrylic here and this piece of acrylic here are some custom fixtures that Puget Systems actually makes before shipping out their products. All sorts of bad things can happen because you got movement in the shipping process. And as an extra layer of protection, they build these, again, these custom fixtures that hold everything in place. All right, so if you're not super familiar with looking inside computers, we've got this thing which is the power supply shroud. The power supply lives behind here, and we have a bunch of cable storage and stuff. On the other side of this area is where all of our storage, like our hard drives and everything goes. The motherboard's up against the wall in the back. We have our one graphics card here. And note, there's plenty of room here for me to add, I think, up to 2 more of these graphics cards later if I find myself doing a lot of GPU rendering, which I'm hoping to be able to do in the future. This here is the radiator sticking off of our CPU. So our CPU is in the middle of the motherboard. We've got the radiator that draws heat away from the computer chip, and then this fan blows air and directs it through the case, but also cools the radiator, again, further cooling the CPU as a result. We've got another case fan in the back, and then our RAM are the vertical sticks on either side of the CPU. When I bring my hand underneath, I notice there is another filter that should keep all the dust out from coming into the chassis from underneath the computer. This, just like the sides and top panels, also have that nice heavily insulated material here. And then, yep, you guessed it, another dust filter So as far as I can tell, this case, which is the Fractal Define C, I believe, takes every precaution necessary to keep the sound from escaping with these heavy-duty insulated panels, as well as the dust from entering the machine from all angles as well. Both of those things should make this a much more pleasant machine to use, as well as one that lasts a lot longer. So something I want to point out about the cooling is that all the fans in this case, the one on the radiator here, as well as the back of the case and the two up front, they're all 140 millimeter Noctua fans. And with them being a little bit larger, so 120 is like the standard size, 140 gives you a slightly larger fan, which usually leads to a little less noise and a little more effective cooling because the fan doesn't have to run as fast to push as much air. I'm really pleased to see not only the Noctua fan here, but also throughout the case, because again, they make great products, and airflow and keeping your components cool is really, really important. So again, the upgraded cooling package here should go a long way to make this a cool PC. So for the graphics card, we chose to go with the RTX 2080 Ti. I believe it has 11 gigs of VRAM, and it's got onboard ray tracing, which basically just means there is some technology on this GPU that certain render programs can take advantage of, which will ultimately lead to faster render times given the software is optimized for it. Now, as for the RAM, we went with 128 gigs of RAM in here. Generally, the more the better. The larger and heavier your 3D scenes get, the more RAM your computer is going to use, and the more computer programs you're running at any given time. Again, the more RAM will be used. And last but not least, this system is powered by the 3rd gen Ryzen Threadripper, the 3970X, which has 32 cores, 64 threads, has a base clock speed of 3.7 gigahertz and a boost clock speed of 4.5 gigahertz. What that means is that this has the same amount of threads as my old machine does, but this is the newer version of the Threadripper, the Gen 3. And as a result, all the processes that this will perform, whether it's on a single thread or multiple threads, are still going to be significantly faster because AMD was able to squeeze out a lot more performance per thread in this latest CPU, and I'm super excited to give it a shot. All right, as we close out the tour of the new PC build, one thing I want to comment on is that you'll notice we don't have fancy braided cables. We don't have RAM with heat sinks and lights on it. We don't have RGB lighting within the case. We don't have a bunch of unnecessary little features on our motherboard. We don't have big glass panels on the case. There's a lot of features that you can do to make a computer more flashy, but in the end, performance is where it's at for anyone who is a professional and cares only for the work they do. And what I love about Puget is the components that they choose to offer are not only to keep costs down, but also reduce unnecessary heat and increase performance and reduce power consumption, making the electricity bill lower each month, making your computer a more efficient system. So again, in the end, I want to point out, I love the way this looks, but I know for anyone who's thinking that they want, more of a gaming style rig with more bells and whistles, just know that you're going to pay for those in one way or another. And personally, I think for the professional, a build like this is definitely the way to go. All right, guys, now that I've been using my new computer for a few weeks now, I wanted to share whether or not the machine itself and Puget Systems customer service has lived up to my expectations or not. So let's start with the machine. Now, the reason I've got a new computer or a second computer was because having one computer created a bottleneck in my business. So I wanted a second machine so that one could remain rendering and the other one could be used for other tasks. Now that I'm doing a lot more video production and tutorials and other content creation, I wanted a machine that was a little bit less purpose-built for just rendering. Now, the CPU in this machine, because it's the newer version of the CPU that's in my old computer, it actually has the same amount of cores, but each core operates quite a bit faster. This means single-threaded operations such as 3D modeling and video editing tasks actually happen quite a bit faster. We also threw a lot of RAM in there, and with the newer generation graphics card, a single 2080 Ti, that also is going to give me good experiences when it comes to rendering out footage. Now, unfortunately, when I got the new system configured and my software on it, I set out to create a Keyshot tutorial, and when I launched Keyshot, the fans on the computer got so loud, it actually prevented me from creating the tutorial. So I reached out to Puget Systems, and they got back to me right away, and they explained a few things that could be causing the excessive noise. When I talked to Puget Systems, I mentioned how hot it gets in my apartment and that keeping my system cool was a high priority. So they put performance fans in my system. That's my fault. Now, the performance fans, they did keep the system cool, but they were simply too loud. Puget Systems was kind enough to send me out new fans, which were part of a silent fan package, and I installed those right away, and immediately the machine was silent. In fact, it was so quiet, it was quieter than my old build, and that was kind of my benchmark, so that blew me away. So now I've got this silent computer that's performing super well and totally meeting my expectations. Now, I wanted to find out how my new computer would compare to my old computer from a performance standpoint, so I ran it through a few basic benchmarks. I chose a couple of Blender's classic benchmark scenes, as well as the new Cinebench. And then the last test I did was one of my own, where I created a cylinder with a bunch of holes in it, and I asked the computer to fillet every edge, which was over 1,000 of them, I believe. And it performed pretty well there too. So overall, I'm happy to say that my new computer is quite a bit faster than the old computer. It's going to help me work on a lot of other tasks outside of just rendering and remove that bottleneck in my workflow, because I can bounce back and forth between the two machines, or I can actually use them together to run something like network rendering. So when I have something like a big animation, I can actually have both machines rendering all at once, and that will increase the productivity that I have from a rendering standpoint as well. So it's safe to say that my new system definitely lives up to my expectations. It does really well in a lot of categories, but it's not super specialized, or it's not top of the line in any one specific area, and that's exactly what I was looking for. Now, to talk about Puget Systems from a customer support or the overall experience of working with them, that's been awesome as well. When I got the new system, they sent me this little box. It has a sheet that shows you how to open and set up your new computer. So they also include a binder with your machine. It has your specific support team, who you worked with. It's got all of the benchmarks and information and settings and quick start guides, FAQ, everything that you might want to know about your system, as well as recovery media and everything that you would ever need. So this is like your little personal care package that they ship you out as well with your computer and then of course all the extra cables and things like that you might need. So in addition to Puget making it easy to order a system that is purpose-built for your own needs, they've also got really good customer support. As I mentioned, when I was initially concerned about the noise my computer was making, I simply sent their support an email. I heard back within a couple hours, and then the email exchange kept up at that rate over the next 2 or 3 days until my issue was resolved. So I just want to point out that their legendary customer support is another thing that make a lot of people big fans of Puget Systems, myself included. Now, I can't say I'm too surprised by this, because Puget Systems has a great reputation, and I did my research before choosing to go with them for my latest build. But I just want to wrap this up and say I'm definitely stoked. I'm happy with the outcome, and I can truly recommend them if you are in this category of either a student who's going to become a professional, or perhaps you're a professional, a freelancer, or somebody who works at a company and you want to work on better hardware. The last 2 videos and this video set out to answer the question that I am so commonly asked, which is, what computer should I buy for 3D modeling and rendering for my next system? And hopefully, if you've watched the last couple videos, taken some time to digest the information, and done a little research, you can answer that question for you. Because of course, the answer is, it depends on what you need and who you are, what your budget is, etc. So my goal of these video series was to teach you enough so you could answer the question I am so commonly asked, which is, what computer do you recommend for 3D modeling and rendering? Now, if you still have questions, or if you want to talk to someone who's an expert on this stuff, you can always give Puget Systems a call. Links down in the bio. And as far as my own system and how this machine is helping my business grow moving forward, expect a video in the next few months in which I will check in and I will do a full breakdown on my entire system, how I'm using these two computers together, and actually how my new system has performed on some actual client work. So stay tuned for that. If you guys have questions, drop them in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed these series. You can expect me to get back into some regular tutorial content soon. And until next time, guys, happy rendering.